If you're currently doing the IBMS registration portfolio and are struggling to find ideas on how to write your evidences, then this video is for you. Hi, my name is Abdul and I'm a fully qualified biomedical scientist. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about how you can write your mandatory evidence for Module 2, Equality, Diversity and Inclusion. So let's talk about what they are asking you to write about. So the mandatory evidence 1 is using specific examples, demonstrate how you apply the principles of equality, diversity, and inclusion in your practice. So let's break this down a little bit. Well, before we do that, let's actually look at the SOPs. Okay, so what standards of proficiencies does this evidence cover? So we've got 5.1. I'll bring out a highlighter. So we've got respond appropriately to the needs of all different groups and individuals in practice. So I'm going to highlight appropriately. Recognizing that this can be affected by difference of any kind, including but not limited to protected characteristics, intersectional experiences, and cultural differences. 5.2, understand equality legislation. So we've got legislation and apply it to their practice. So the Equality Act 2010 defines the protected characteristics and it gives you a bunch of characteristics here. 5.3, recognize the potential impact of their own values, beliefs, and personal biases, which may be unconscious on practice, and take personal action to ensure all service users and carers are treated appropriately with respect and dignity. So I'll highlight this as a keyword as well. And then finally, 5.7, recognize that regard to equality, diversity, and inclusion needs to be embedded in the application of all HCPC standards across all areas of practice. Okay, so now we kind of know what we're sort of looking for in terms of what to write about in our evidence in order to hit all these points. So from that, this is essentially what you should write about. So equality, diversity, and inclusion is at the heart of biomedical science practice, but in the IBMS portfolio, mandatory evidence 1 isn't asking for a lecture on EDI. It's asking for a reflection on how you apply these principles in your practice. So that's what the mandatory evidence is asking you. So it's reflection on how you apply these principles of, equality, diversity, and inclusion. So how do we write this evidence? What are the building blocks we can use to write our evidence to? So the IBMS have asked you to use specific examples to demonstrate how you apply the principles of EDI in your practice. So how you can do this is you can talk about a real life scenario, a situation that you've seen or experienced that really demonstrates equality, diversity, and inclusion. So another example could also be a reflection on any EDI training that you've received. So any online e-learning that you've done that you've got a certificate for, you can use that as an evidence. And also you can write about your awareness of the protected characteristics and how they are protected at your workplace. So that's the sort of tools that we can use or think about gathering to when it comes to writing this evidence. So once you've got the tools, you can think about how you want to present your evidence, how you can structure it. So there are different ways you can actually present your evidence in this. It doesn't have to be a long piece of text, although it can be. But you can be a little bit more interesting and use a variety of different ways of presenting your evidences. So for example, you can use a mind map. So you can talk about, the protected characteristics like age or, race, so religion, apologies for the handwriting. But yeah, so you can talk about each of the characteristics, and then you can talk about how, the lab or the trust in general, the organization, protect them, how they accommodate for them, so any disabilities as well, any disabilities, so how the disabilities such as hard of hearing people or people who have who are unable to walk or on wheelchairs, if there's step-free access to certain buildings, lifts, that sort of thing you can talk about and possibly include images of. You can also write a table. So in that table you can put protected characteristics, so protected characteristics and how you sort of protect them as well. So you can list all the protected characteristics, and then next to each one you can talk about sort of how these people are accommodated for. And lastly, you can talk about you can even use a reflective log, so you can talk about a scenario or example that demonstrates, you know, a lot of the EDI demonstrations. You can talk about like a specific example or scenario that's happened and the outcomes and sort of how these people were accommodated for as well. So now we've got a structure, we can talk about certain examples that you can use. So in the reflective log example, this is just a piece of text that shows you the structure or how you can word a certain or how you can word your evidence in your reflective logs. So let's talk about it. So we've got, during my training, I worked with a colleague who required adjustments due to a disability. I recognized that my usual way of communicating might not have been appropriate. So I adapted my approach and sought advice. This showed me how small adjustments can make colleagues feel respected and included. It also reminded me of the importance of being aware of my own assumptions. So with this paragraph, we've kind of with this paragraph, we've kind of hit a few points here. So I'm going to highlight. So respond appropriately to the needs of different groups of individuals, and also recognizing, and also 5.3, recognize the potential, and also 5.3, recognizing the potential impact of their own values, belief, and personal biases. So we look at our example is the importance of being aware of my own assumptions. So what this sentence does is it shows that you're self-aware, you know, that other people are different and not everyone's going to be able to do the same things you can do. So that hits the 5.3 point. So that hits the SOP 5.3 really well. And also taking personal actions to ensure all service users and carers are treated appropriately with respect and dignity. And yes, this sentence, again, it kind of uses the same words. Make sure my colleagues feel respected as well. So this sentence is how you can, it shows how, again, you can use the wording from the SOPs in your actual evidences and just kind of tweak them and make them relevant for you. And in the second piece, you can talk about, after completing EDI training, I became more aware of unconscious bias. I applied this by ensuring when assisting in recruitment tasks, I focus only on relevant competencies, avoiding assumptions about background or culture. So let's look at how this applies to our SOPs. So we've got, let's just remind ourselves, so you've got unconscious bias, EDI training, relevant competencies, avoiding assumptions about background and culture. So again, you can talk about legislations that you've learnt about. So in your EDI training, you can talk about that you learned about the Equality Act and all these protected characteristics. And you know about different groups and individuals, responding appropriately to them. And you can also mention how you learned about unconscious bias. So some people might not have been aware of this concept before their training. So you can talk about, after you received that training, how it was important for you because you then realize where your own biases can come into play, and then you can consciously take that out. So that is one example that you can talk about. The second one is a mind map again, which I mentioned earlier. So you can use this mind map in different ways. You can use each of the arm and talk about the protected characteristics, or alternatively, you can talk about different ways the protected characteristics are accommodated for. So let's say amendments to practice. Amend practice. So you can talk about, you know, multi-faith rooms available for different religions to practice their faith. You can talk about disabled access to certain areas. You can also talk about the hiring process where, you know, where gender is not part of the application. You can talk about certain events that are going on for people to express their culture. You can also talk about when you book in samples, you're not prioritizing another sample over a different one because of name, gender, race, religion, all that. You just only prioritize due to urgency and first come, first served basis. So that's an idea that you can put in your example. Another way of presenting your evidence could be in a table. So again, you can have your protected characteristics here, and then you can talk about how you demonstrate. So you can talk about on the right-hand column how you treat these people equally and you don't show any bias, conscious or unconscious. So again, the table is an easy way of demonstrating this quite nicely and neatly. So things to avoid when writing your evidences. I'd say the first one is no reflection on the importance of EDI. So a lot of people write about why it's important. It's important to be equal in your decisions and actions, but not really mention why it's important. And to help you, you can look back at the SOPs. So it mentions here to ensure all service users and carers are treated appropriately with respect and dignity. So another mistake could be they're not linking relevant examples of actual practice. So think about things that you've gone through, what training you've been through and how the lab actually accommodates for different types of people. So a lot of the mistakes that I've seen is, they're not using relevant examples, they're kind of using things off topic. So try your best to find things in the lab or in the trust, look at your emails. I'm sure you've been receiving a lot of EDI emails. You can use examples from those and then link it to your practice, how you've changed it, what happened, and that will make really, really good evidence. And lastly, another mistake I find students make is that they kind of overcomplicate this a little bit. This piece of evidence isn't too technical. It is quite broad, which does make it hard in terms of being a little bit specific and making things concise. But try not to worry about it too much. Generally state the facts, talk about the protected characteristics and how those people are accommodated for to ensure an equal environment, and then conclude on why it's important. Just follow that structure. You don't have to necessarily go into a whole lecture or sort of preach about any particular thing. Just try and keep it factual and keep it simple. Generally those are the best evidences. So yeah, avoid overcomplicating. And that is the end of the example. So I hope that's given you a good idea on how to write this mandatory piece of evidence. And like I said, it doesn't need to be too complicated. This one is one of the more easier ones to hit. So definitely look at your previous training records, any emails that you've been given, and get those into your evidences and talk about how these protected characteristics are sort of treated equally and how they are accommodated for. And if you are interested, I do have a full guide available. It talks about how to write the IBMS training portfolio. It's got bonus content and also an example of my own portfolio, which you can use to help you write your evidences later on. Thank you so much for watching and take care.